Dowling here, Mitch Kurtz here. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the AltMed podcast. And if you like what we're doing, please like and subscribe. We have way more content coming out and it's all fantastic. Please. Please.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the AltMed podcast. My name is Andrew Dowling. My co-host Mitch Kurtz is with me as always. And if you do like AltMed, if you're really enjoying the show, you've been catching up on all the episodes and just doing a deep dive into the archives, please remember to hit like and subscribe to get all our content straight to wherever you get your podcast feeds. Today we have a special guest and a good friend of ours from within this amazing industry, formerly the operations manager, now the product manager at Brisbane Compounding Pharmacy. It is Liz Warburton. Liz, thank you so much for joining us on AltMed.
Hey guys, very, very excited to be here. I've been a watcher for a long time.
Long time listener, first time caller. So yeah, I'm trying to remember when we first crossed paths with you, but your name from really early days, I think, came onto our radar because we were hearing about, all the pharmacists that were, there was a select few at the time that were, really embracing medical cannabis and helping with access. But maybe if you can just take us through how you got your start, how you fell into this industry and I guess your role at BCP.
Beautiful. It's a very interesting story, to be perfectly honest. I am here by serendipity alone. I tell people it was luck, but there was a lot of hard work that went into it as well. So Brisbane Compounding Pharmacy has actually been alive and well since about 2017. The owner and director of BCP used to work 7 days a week, all the time. I think it was about 80 or 90 hours a week. He was always there. So I lived in the building above the pharmacy for about 2 years, from 2018 till 2020. And just before I was about to move out in early 2020, COVID was just kind of starting to hit. And I walked down to the pharmacy to get some toilet paper during that big toilet paper issue. And Shaz was basically saying that he was freaking out because his naturopath had just quit. So I obviously had a qualification. So I put my name forward and then I started working there, and I was there during COVID. We did a lot of hand sanitizer at the time. And in September of 2020, we signed on with CDA. So we ended up becoming one of the largest cannabis dispensaries within about 3 or 4 months. And I think it really was because we just cared about patients and we knew what we were doing. So I had previous experience with cannabis. Being a naturopath, I obviously have experience with herbal medicine as well. And our pharmacists were really open to it. Not all of them are, but ours definitely were. And so I kind of got put on the phone every time somebody called with an issue. And here I am. So I was the operations manager in conjunction with our managing pharmacist. We ended up building pretty much the business, and it was very, very chaotic, but it's been really, really rewarding and really, really fun. And it's been, really nice to kind of see how the industry moves and how patients respond to cannabis in general. And there's a lot to know, a lot more than people, I think, expect. So now I'm the product manager of Brisbane Compounding Pharmacy and Seed Pharmaceuticals. Basically, my job now is to go and look at cannabis farms, talk to people about cannabis, educate people about cannabis, and basically put this industry in the right direction is what we're trying to do.
Chief product tester. Is it not to get all like reductive on this, but is it fair to say that you wouldn't be working in this industry if you just leased another place to live?
Yep, that is absolutely the truth. It was luck, but as I said, I'm here today where I am because of hard work and a lot of it.
That's awesome. No, it's such an amazing story, and I am now getting flashbacks to those early days of when the pandemic set in. And I think a lot of compounding pharmacies were doing hand sanitizer. Just for my own interest, what actually makes a hand sanitizer product? I assume lots of alcohol.
Yeah, lots and lots of ethanol and glycerin, essentially. That's the beauty of a compounding pharmacy. We see something missing and we know we can make it, so we do.
That's so cool. So maybe diving into compounding for medical cannabis, has that space evolved in the time that you've been working in it? Like, what kind of products does BCP work with in the compounding context?
If you can ask for it, I can make it, essentially. There's all sorts of different products that we can make. You know, we can make pessaries, we can make capsules, we can make lozenges, we can make topical creams,
Gummies?
Absolutely, we can make gummies.
Would you do like lolly snakes or something with?
Look, if I'm being honest with you, I do actually have a bit of an ethical dilemma with making gummy bear shaped THC. I don't think I should make something that's supposed to be child friendly when it's a medication. Unfortunately, it's quite hard to get child safety locks when it comes to compounding packaging. It is possible, but a little bit difficult, especially with things like gummies. And I'm just not interested really in a child picking it up. So mine are really boring and they're just squares and it's just medicine, but it still tastes nice and it's still a gummy and it's great flavored. So
Yeah. Does it have like a stamp on it that says not for kids or something?
No, I wish. I actually did look into that to see if I could find it and I couldn't find it.
That's hilarious. So, okay, so I'm going to throw some stuff at you. So, I mean, a lot of our audience will have accessed medical cannabis or know someone that has. And I think for a lot of those people, they will have, been prescribed, so-called finished good. So, or straight off the shelf, maybe a dried flower product or an oil product. When we're talking about compounding, is the reason why somebody accesses compounded medical cannabis over a finished product because they are trying to dose? Like what are the reasons that take someone to having a more bespoke medical cannabis product?
Yes, so we can make anything that doesn't currently exist on the market. So really it comes down to the whole point of compounding is the individualized care of the patient, right? So if they've got certain allergies, we're going to change the ingredients. If they don't like the taste of something or they're not able to tolerate something, that's when we would come in with, another oil carrier, so to speak. So a lot of people tend to have issues with MCT oil. There's only a few SKUs on the market that actually have other oils such as olive oil and sesame oil. It's a good example. And so basically it means that we can tailor anything that they need. There's no limitation on what we can do. So obviously THC gummies don't exist on the market, so we can make those for people. Sublingual absorption is kind of iffy on the market. They've got wafers and things like that, but they're usually only 25 to 50 milligram CBD. So if you need anything else in there, you're going to need a compounder. There is Sativex, obviously, but that is quite expensive at the moment. So at least you can get, different kinds of absorption. Say you don't absorb fats well, let's try sublingual. You have endometriosis, let's try something a little bit closer to home and use a pessary. It's more directed, I suppose, is the best way to put it.
And is that like when you say flavor? Well, because I've spoken to patients who some people just really don't like the flavor of a cannabis oil, and some people love it. It's really subjective. But what, because I've had people say, oh, what should I do? Do I have honey? Like, do you have any thoughts around how to deal with that on the compound side, or?
Yeah, so we obviously have flavorings that we can use, and those flavorings would be paired with the particular taste. So for example, butterscotch isn't too bad, chocolate isn't too bad with THC. You've just got to find the flavors that pair well with it. If we're talking about oil specifically.
It's like kind of, it evokes imagery of, and I know I've like been to a few compounding pharmacies, but this idea that you're just sort of like working around a kitchen and you've got like a pantry full of different recipes. It's like, oh, you like how do you go with chili? You like a bit of chili? Let me throw that in.
They also use the tools as well. Like they have that like spatula thing that you use when you're making a cake, and like you see the tools, you're like, this is actually like cooking it up.
And then you try and lick the spoon every single time. Anyway,
yeah,
definitely not with Schedule 8s.
No.
Look, that's the absolute beauty of compounding. You can do whatever you want. And I really, really respect compounders because they're really, really good at thinking outside of the box. Okay, you've got this problem. This is how I'm going to solve it for you.
Yeah.
Something I'm curious about. I always see this, when you look at the certificate on the side of on the side of the pharmacy, you see non-sterile compounding.
Mm.
What does that means that it's not basically like a GMP lab?
So sterile compounding is your injectables, your eye drops,
Right.
things like that. Things like that. You don't want to put anything in your eye that hasn't, is completely hygienic, etc. You can't have any kind of impurities in your intravenous. So it's a whole different ball game going into sterile. We don't actually have sterile ourselves. You have to have a containment room and all sorts of stuff. But we do have quite a few non-sterile. So it's still sterile. We're not working under dirty circumstances, but you're talking about air pressure, changing clothes, all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
It's a lot more intense.
Okay.
Not a squalid compounding pharmacy where you've got like mud on the walls and all the rest.
I mean, hopefully no compounding pharmacies have mud on the walls. Yeah, essentially.
I can't imagine any would, to be honest, because people think that getting a license for a cannabis company or something like that's tough. Try dealing with the pharmacy board on top of that. That is a whole another kettle of fish. And can you just give a little bit of light to people out there that don't understand how stringent the pharmacy board, like the state pharmacy boards are? It's am
I right in saying is Queensland one of the anomaly states where there isn't a pharmacy board, or there is?
We have a pharmacy board. Our compounding regulations are a little bit looser than, say, New South Wales and Victoria.
Right.
It's just in regard to how you operate. I mean, we still operate, to be honest with you, under New South Wales standards, just to be safe. Our SOP document is 460 pages long, just to give you an idea of how intense the processes can be and how detailed every little piece of movement is, wiping a bench after you do this and then logging that, and it can get pretty intense, but there's a reason for it, obviously.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, so you have on the one hand your facilities and the way you store and supply medicines being governed by that body, and then all the training that the pharmacists do and how they're sort of regulated by APRA. It's I think it's fair to say, any given compounding pharmacy is a highly regulated space. So maybe I'd just be interested, are you able to give us a bit of a sort of a de-identified case study of the types of, people that might sort of come in and that you and the team at BCP would have helped along the journey?
In regard to compounding, it really just comes down to the fact that the patient has been able to find something that didn't, exist prior. Really, the most meaningful interactions, I suppose, I've personally had is when we do things like the specialized products like the pessaries for endometriosis. There's not a whole lot of compounding pharmacies in Australia where you can get CBD pessaries. And the beauty of, me having naturopathy behind me is I can always add, products in that are synergistic for the patient, so there's no side effects, things like that. We love a full spectrum extract. And just being able to, I do remember specifically at one point there was a mother who emailed us, and basically her daughter had debilitating endometriosis, would be out for a week once a month kind of thing. And basically her mother was like, this is the best thing in the world. We need to tell everybody about these, and, blah, blah, blah. My daughter's gotten her life back. And, wow. It's really, really nice to see, those specified medications that really go the extra bit further for these people, because endometriosis, don't get me wrong, the oils are going to help. But when you're putting something a lot closer to home, it's going to do a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really curious about that, what you were saying with the naturopathy kind of interactivity, let's say, between, complementary medicines. I really want to deconstruct that, because we see a lot of stuff, you go into let's say cannabis themed dispensary pharmacy, for lack of a better term, these days. And you see a lot of, cannabis leaning products, hemp seed oils, or, hemp candles and the rest. But you also see these newer kind of things, nootropics, these kind of terpene based active, non-active, but kind of marketed as active. And I just want to get a little bit of your insights into that active versus non-active, how they might interact, what they're doing. Can you take them on their own? Do you have to take them with cannabis to get the real effects? Like, how does it work?
It's interesting that you use the language active and non-active, because I think that would really depend on who you're speaking to. For people like myself, synergy is everything. So everyone knows what the entourage effect is in the cannabis world. Every herbalist knows what synergy is. And synergy has been proven time and time again. I know that there's studies specifically relating to valerian where they've isolated certain compounds and tested it and got absolutely nothing out of it, and then they've put the compounds back together in a full spectrum essentially and gotten what they wanted out of it. And it's very much the same with cannabis. Being in a pharmacy for 2 years and obviously having a lot of experience with isolates, we compound it, we sell it, there's manufactured versions, etc., etc. Yes, pharmacologically it makes people who are used to pharmacy medicine more comfortable, but in my experience, isolates are not nearly as powerful as the full spectrum extracts. I'm a full spectrum girl through and through, and the idea basically of synergy is that you've got say 150 different compounds working towards similar goals. Some of them are increasing absorption, some of them are reducing side effects, some of them are helping with your metabolism of that particular active constituent. So there's a lot of different mechanisms in how it works, and it's kind of funny actually, because I read a million clinical trials. It's what I do in my spare time, and it's really funny watching the pharmaceutical groups try to navigate herbalism and synergy, because they're so used to that clean cut reductionist kind of way of functioning, whereas this is very much holistic and it's more outcome based instead of mechanism based. So a lot of us over in the herbal section, it's like I do want to know what the mechanism is. I'm an absolute nerd for it, but the reality is you don't necessarily have to know the mechanism behind something to know that it works. And that's what cannabis is kind of bringing into the sphere, and I'm really loving it.
Well, that's it. It's the same with paracetamol, right? They don't actually know exactly how it works. I heard somebody theorize that it's acting on the ECS the other day, but we know it works. We know it's safe.
Yeah. I read actually the other day that statins actually disrupt the ECS, which I would believe anything that disrupts your fat metabolism is going to disrupt the ECS. But yeah, a lot of pharmaceutical medications work on the endocannabinoid system and don't even know it.
Wow,
very interesting. But does that mean, so would you advocate as a herbalist? Sounds so kind of Eastern medicine, but would you advocate as a herbalist for non-cannabinoid containing yet cannabis terpene flavonoid containing medicines, should I say products at this stage, because the TGA doesn't recognize them as active ingredients?
Terpenes are one of the most pharmaceutically active constituents herbal medicine has, just to start with. But
sure, but they're not actually classified. I don't have any issue with it
whatsoever. I'm like, in naturopathy, we already know that terpenes and flavonoids have medicinal effects. It's in thousands upon thousands of our botanical medicines. We study it. We already know this. What I'm concerned about is people who are interacting with these medications that don't actually know what they're doing. So people getting isolates from places they shouldn't be getting those isolates, using impure substances. And because it's a natural medicine, it's not going to hurt anybody, of course. And it's just simply not true. So I think with any herbal medicine, or to be honest with you, most medicines, you really want it in the hands of people who understand it and are passionate about it.
I mean, but so are you saying there's the possibility or capability for these things interacting, even if they're not? I mean, we do see that with, like, what is it, St. John's wort and things like that. Is that right? St.
John's wort interacts with almost any medication you can think of. If someone's on medication, I just don't go anywhere near it. Look,
even grapefruit, right? You're not meant to have grapefruit with like half of the medication that exists.
No, yeah. If you're on medications, especially heart medications, don't touch grapefruit. It's not going to be good for you.
Yeah.
Look, terpenes and flavonoids are really not going to interact with anything. You would find it would be very difficult. Where you would find issues is if it was really, really high dose. Again, I don't know if this is necessarily true when it comes to flavonoids. They're antioxidants. They're very good for you. But definitely in regard to terpenes, they can reach levels of toxicity pretty quickly. And again, because everyone thinks it's a plant medicine, it's going to be fine. But really, I've seen, vape cartridges, like liquid vape cartridges with 15% plus terpenes, and that can be incredibly damaging to your lungs. It's not good for you. It shouldn't be above 5%.
So if you see someone getting like carted out of an ambulance, they might have OD'd on myrcene or something.
Highly unlikely. Usually the impurities that are attached to it.
Yeah.
I mean, look, for example, you go into nature, you're not going to be able to smell so much nature, you're going to make yourself sick. It's just, it's not really what's going to happen. It's just if it's super concentrated, which is what tends to happen with the synthetic versions of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
When was the last time you drank essential oil, Andrew?
Oh, mate, I had some this morning.
I know someone who has, but
no, it's well, and
isn't it kind of like caustic almost? Like, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely caustic. So, you know, if it gets too high, you could absolutely be melting your lungs, for a lack of a better phrase.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, but even drinking it is probably not advised.
I'm sure your burps would smell nice though, for sure.
But yeah, they smell like a fresh, you know, hotel linen.
No,
hotel linen burps.
I know people who have drinking straight essential oils and survived, but I very much don't recommend it.
Yeah. You heard it first from the apothecary in Brisbane, ladies and gentlemen. But I do think the like this is why, you know, concentrates, they are dangerous. People really should, you know, if they're interested in terpenes, obviously whole plant extracts, you don't find necessarily, you know, unhealthy levels of terpenes in such extracts. So, you know, stick to those. But I am kind of interested though in exploring this idea of terpenes, because it's, I suppose the controversy, at least in my mind to date, has been that they're not really considered active ingredients. So when people talk about cannabis as a medicine, we seem to talk about the cannabinoids as the only actives. And so then you go, well, are they excipients? Well, how should we think of them? Do you have any thoughts around that? Is it really just at a certain level they become therapeutically active, but it's hard to say when that is, or it's case by case depending on the terpene? I know this is a very tricky area, but do you have any thoughts on it?
Look, anything I say is going to be anecdotal. There is definitely scientific evidence to say that all of it is active, but it's very much, we're still working our way through it. So I don't want to get too excited and say this is definitely going to do this. But what I do know, I do know that sleepier kinds of strains definitely have a higher myrcene content. And what I also know is that myrcene specifically has been shown to work on the opioid receptors. We all know that there's strains that work better for pain and strains that don't. And they can both be 20% THC, but you get completely different effects. I mean, look at sativa and indica. And I know that a lot of people have issues with these particular terms. I get it. There are sleepy strains and there are strains you can have during the day. Let's leave it at that.
No,
and
of course.
Strains generally have a higher myrcene content, and it just is what it is. Just because we don't necessarily have the science behind all of it completely, we know that they're active. And just because we don't know something doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah. And it's a really interesting point, because, you know, I suppose, well, I know that under the relevant, you know, medical cannabis standard TGO93, any product supplied in Australia, all the actives have to come from the plant. So, you know, to the extent that they are actives, it's still obviously a compliant product. But I'm thinking about always jumping off on legal tangents, as you know, Liz. But I think, you know, in the fullness of time, maybe we will start to see, you know, suppliers actually stating the terpene, you know, mix in their products, and even the amount, you know, that's been detected.
It's already starting to come through, I think, in the industry. That's already starting a little bit.
Here's even the issues I have with people labeling their terpene amounts, and it's me being finicky. But as a lot of people know, terpenes are volatile compounds. If your cannabis is coming, say, from Canada, and you don't have any, you know, Boveda packs or Integra packs or whatever, and you're not storing it correctly, even storing it in plastic can leach the terpenes. By the time you get it over here to Australia, it's got a different terpene content. It's not the same. So it's kind of hard. Like your cannabinoids are going to stay stable for the most part. They will leach off, and, you know, THC will break down into CBN eventually, but they're a lot more stable than the volatile compounds. So I've even noticed personally that stuff that's imported doesn't necessarily smell as great as stuff that I've tried that, you know, say is somewhat fresh. And that's just the volatile oils. It's just what happens.
Yeah.
So while I appreciate people putting their terpenes, and also when you put something like contains CBG on a whole flower, all flowers contain CBG. Let's not fool anybody here, guys. We know that all flowers contain CBG. They have CBC, CBD, the whole spectrum.
Contains
So
plant material.
It's better than other people's just because you put something on there.
Yeah.
To a certain degree, you know?
Yeah. This product may contain traces of cannabis. You know, you might as well be running that.
That's what I'm all happy with. No,
yeah.
Some of them might not.
Yeah, true.
That is true. That is true. That's a quality thing too. But yeah, look, there's a lot of studies going around at the moment that I've seen. Maybe it's just the one that I keep seeing, but the nose is kind of how it's labeled. And the better smelling your container is, the more likely you're going to get a strong effect. And that one, that's a testament to terpenes, and two, it's a testament to quality. There's a specific brand. I remember one of my call center managers was like, I opened it up in one room and they could smell it in another. That's good cannabis, my friends.
Yeah.
If you're like in the jar trying to smell it and you can't get anything out of it, don't really waste your time.
Yeah, wow. That's and so I think that's right. And I mean, especially we've seen, particularly in jurisdictions like Canada, where there's just been an oversupply of cannabis almost. I hear anecdotally, you know, through the cannabis vine, that some product that's being imported, you know, might be at least a year old, or it's just not fresh. And it does, I think people accept this now that, you know, certainly you actually lose a bit of weight over the course of time as it continues to dry. You know, there's all sorts of things that happen in the course. And yeah, of course, the actual cannabinoid content may remain relatively stable in that product for whatever its shelf life, and it could be 2 years or something. But yeah, the product does change. It's a plant product, so I think people are really starting to be appreciative of that.
Absolutely. Watching the TGA navigate plant medicine as a pharmaceutical has been really fun for me.
Yeah, to be fair, I'm trying to think whether or not anything could have prepared them. I mean, I sort of, when you think about, I guess, the way in which access to unapproved therapeutics, so, the special access scheme just became inundated so quickly with medicinal cannabis applications.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I imagine before that they were probably dealing with, quite, experimental or some unusual requests, but yeah, it's been a steep learning curve for everyone, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've had to chop and change things for a while. I'm sure you guys remember when the approvals weren't category based and everything was product based.
Yes.
And the product would go out for a month or two because they're having supply issues. That was really fun for us.
Yeah. Well, so maybe some reflections on, I guess, over time, I know that BCP has taken on a few employees over the last few years. Talk us through the journey to date and kind of what your hopes are going forward.
Oh, it has been an absolute journey. So when we signed on with CDA, I actually remember we would receive script piles, and I called every single person personally and was like, "Hey, you want your cannabis? Hey, you want your cannabis? Hey, you want your cannabis?" We had, I think it was 3 part-time employees, and then the owner just worked all the time. And now I'd say we have over 50 employees. We have 4 pharmacies, 3 in Queensland, 1 in Melbourne, and we're definitely looking to expand. In all honesty, we've got a very, very optimistic future. Myself and the director, the owner of the company, we really, there's a reason I followed him. It's because he really, really cares about people. We did a lot of the opioid program before we did cannabis, and he really showed me that you can be kind towards people who can be, difficult or whatever. And a lot of the times these people are just human beings and they just want to be listened to, and they get thrown out the door by a lot of people simply because they're going through things, et cetera, et cetera. And so I guess we took that passion into cannabis, which is why we went above and beyond for so long. The amount of time Shaz covered people's, post going missing, and it was $500, and we just had to fork it out because we didn't want the patient to go without. So now we're just trying to grow and kind of help anyone we can in the cannabis industry. There's a lot of people who, I guess, not lost, but need guidance. And there's a lot of prescribing that could definitely be better, and there's definitely ways to navigate this system. So our focus in the future really is to kind of lend support to both, you know, pharmacies, doctors, anyone we really can, just so we can get the best outcome for the patient. And we still do a lot of the compounding, and we still have a normal pharmacy. We do all of it. We don't just do cannabis, because we don't believe that cannabis is the answer to absolutely everything. And
Sure?
it also gives us the beauty of being able to, you know, mix cannabis and herbal medicine with pharmaceuticals and things like that. So yeah, we're just kind of, I guess, trying to change an industry a little bit and make sure that it's done correctly, because there is a lot of big players doing the wrong thing, and we're really passionate about making sure that the right thing happens, because it means that patients will get the outcomes they're here for, you know.
Absolutely. No, and I mean, you guys are such a central part of the industry now. I know there's some changes that have been flagged as far as, you know, manufacturing quality for imported ingredients. I anticipate this will have some impact on the compounding side for you guys, but I mean, overall, is the change? Am I overstating really what the extent to which that's going to impact, or like what's that going to be like for you guys?
What it's going to do is it's going to impact the people that supply us.
Right.
So I'm actually kind of stoked with the changes. I have seen and heard of pharmacies that have been handing out flour that I wouldn't sell on the street. And that's simply because, unfortunately, pharmacists don't have the same experience. And then there's, you know, they have experience in pharmaceuticals. They're not smoking weed in their spare time. It's totally fair. But the flour that they're handing out to patients is egregious, in all honesty. And I think there should be some standards brought to it, because, as I said, so the biggest compounding, you know, brand in Australia, Mediska, they don't have any protocols on how to compound cannabis. These pharmacists and, you know, myself, we're all making it up as we go. We're all trying to read the studies that we can to make sure that we're doing the right thing, but there's no protocols.
Why is that? I'm just like, I'm so curious, just given that, you know, compounding of medical cannabis has been, I would have thought, thrust into the spotlight for at least the last 3 years or so. I'm just curious why they're not, because I you hear time and time again, there's, you know, pharmacies that might have a small part of their pharmacy is in compounding, and they have a patient that presents with a script and they just have no idea what to do, and you know they're looking for that guidance. I don't want to throw Mediska under the bus here. I'm just simply asking the question: Have you maybe thought about developing some protocols or some guidelines, or is it more just you know, eventually these patients or these scripts find their way to the bigger compounding pharmacies anyway?
Yeah, look, in Mediska's defense, they definitely reached out to us and asked us if we could help them out.
Yeah, okay.
It just didn't end up coming to fruition, to be perfectly honest. It's not their fault. It's been illegal for a long time, and there's a lot of, we're dealing with a natural substance. This isn't just a powder of something that's pure, where, you know, there's a lot of different forms. THC distillate is very difficult to work with. It's like honey that doesn't move. You have to melt it down. You have to, you know, do the correct things with it. Then there's CBD powder, there's CBD distillate, there's, you know, full spectrum powders. There's so many different ingredients, and you have to know what you're looking for to know what to get, so to speak. Yeah. And a lot of our guidance did come from CDA. We did a lot of compounding with them for a long time, but in saying that, Shaz was the one who came up with a lot of the ways to do things, so to speak. So part of being a compounder is thinking on your feet. Again, this is why I really respect them. But at the same time, natural substances, while they're not superior, they're not more difficult necessarily, they're just another ball game that they need to learn about. So a lot of them just don't know. And the reality is you're not going to spend, you know, 2 days trying to figure out a cannabis formulation when you can just pass it on to someone else and make money, you know, doing your health checkups, etc.
Yeah. Well, and what about the I guess it, just as you were talking, I was thinking about how when you look at the field of finished products, and that field has obviously grown enormously in the last few years, but are there themes where you kind of just look at that and go, well, based on what we're compounding at the pharmacy here, really strikes me as odd that, you know, those suppliers of finished products aren't tapping into, you know, flavors or, you know, different forms of how they do it? Or do you think that it's more a case that for a lot of people, the suite of available finished products is sufficient, and you're just kind of picking up the slack with those more complex individual needs along the way. Is that a way of framing it?
Yeah, look, I think what the biggest issue at the moment is just the simple fact that a lot of people aren't, you can't say fully educated, aren't really deep down in the whole of cannabis. It's highly complex. There's a lot to know. There's 150 to 400 constituents, possibly plus, that you're dealing with at any one go. And I think people are just kind of copying and pasting studies. I mean, a really good example of this is the fact that we've just had 2 failed clinical trials for CBD 150 milligram for insomnia.
Yeah.
I could have told them before they spent all that money that it was not ever going to help insomnia. It's an isolate, it's CBD, it's not a high enough dose. A lot of clinical trials will say minimum you need 800 milligrams a day plus to see therapeutic value out of a CBD isolate. Now, this is different depending on the person, depending on the condition. But 150 milligram for insomnia was never going to happen. And
what about with a little bit of myrcene in there?
Well, I mean,
was that the missing ingredient?
Again, where was it sourced? What's
It
the
was.
spec of the
There are a
myrcene?
few
Like,
things. That was the wrong condition, I reckon,
Yeah.
for CBD.
absolutely.
It was an isolated compound. It was too low a dose. They're going for the S3 thing, but I just think that it was highly wasteful. I'd say, unfortunately, because
A real shame.
I think anyone that knew cannabis, and this is one of the problems, you've got this weird complexity in the industry where you've got people with extremely, like, a lot of study, a lot of understanding of the medical side, PK, PD data of cannabis. And then you've got this whole kind of people that have literally been taking cannabis for the last 40 years and really know their stuff about the plant itself, possibly not, about how it interacts with different medications and that kind of side of things. But they definitely understand the plant pretty intimately from using it in different ways, and could tell you a lot of that information. I think that's why we have this very strange situation in Australia, but possibly the rest of the world, but especially in Australia, where you've almost got 2 bodies of education in a sense. There's people being hired in pharmaceutical land by people. There's people that don't have traditional backgrounds that are being hired by pharmaceutical companies to give them the understanding of this plant, which they should theoretically know better, but it's just not quite the same. As you said before, you've got 2 THC plants that are 20% having very different effects. Why is that? Like, that's not something that you can explain if hey, guess what? THC is the only really active chemical in this, but the terpenes and the rest don't matter. They're inactive, but you're having a very different outcome. So I think that's an ongoing kind of conversation and scenario, which will have to be somewhat managed, but interestingly, you can't work in the pharmaceutical side of things unless you have a fit and proper person test, and some of the most educated or cannabis knowledgeable people might not necessarily pass that test.
Yeah, well, but just, I mean, I look at it, I'm like, well, it depends what we do with that failed data, right? I like to not be wasteful with it. I think it's the perfect paper is there to be written and presented to regulators to say, hey, guess what? We followed this methodology. We dosed at this amount. This was the cohort. This is the placebo. Hey, we now know unequivocally that 150 milligrams a day for insomnia or sleep disorder doesn't do shit. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm using scientific language there, but I think you catch my drift. It's so I hope that we're now sort of aware of that, and that we can maybe a little bit more seriously look at, okay, well, what is because I think that maximum amount of 150 had earlier been less than that. And there were concerns about toxicity and tolerance in humans. I think we need to seriously revisit that. I mean, I don't, can you maybe, with, again, all de-identified, but what kind of dosages of, say, CBD have you seen people being prescribed over the journey, Liz? Can you shed any light? Is it above 150, can we say, without...
There are definitely patients on the higher oils. There's very few oils that are at the 150. There's one oil that's at the 240 mark. they're just so expensive. And the unfortunate thing is, like, as I said before, 800 milligrams a day is kind of your bare minimum for the more serious conditions. So you think about it, you've got 100 milligram per mil, which is your average on the market. You usually get it in a 30 mil bottle for, say, $150. That's a third of your bottle a day if you want to see outcomes.
Yeah. Is that with an isolate only? Or?
Isolate, yes, I am talking isolate. Some people find more therapeutic benefit out of, if they've got the terpenes added, CBG, CBN, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it really comes down to a change in the way that we think. And this is what I'm most excited about being a part of the cannabis industry, is I get to watch this change from this pharmaceutical isolate mechanism kind of thinking, which, don't get me wrong, works. And I have a lot of respect for what's happened in, modern medicine, et cetera. I'm a naturopath. You break your leg, please don't come to me. You're having a serious episode, please don't come to me. I'm here to prevent things. I need modern medicine to complement what I do, and vice versa. But what it's forcing the medical, people in medicine to actually think about is the holism, and the fact that it's an individual. You could have one person on a 20 milligram per mil oil go absolutely nuts, and another person who can drink half the bottle and feel absolutely nothing. And so you can't say for sure that this is the dose. This is the dose for everybody, because there is no dose for everybody. It's start low and go slow, see what works for you. And this is, in my opinion, how all medicine should work. How do you as a person kind of deal with this? I remember very specifically, this one actually, sticks to my mind. This was maybe early 2021. And someone hands me the phone, this older lady is having a reaction to the THC. She doesn't know what to do. So they put me on the phone. Basically, this lady had a 1010 oil. She had one drop of a 1010 oil. I could drink probably half the bottle, maybe the whole thing, and feel okay. And she, was panicking. She's like, I've been to my doctor. I've been to another pharmacy. My heart's beating out of my chest. I feel really panicked. It feels like there's another person in the room. I don't know what's happening, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, first and foremostly, do you have any heart conditions? And she was like, nope, all clear. And I'm like, okay, fantastic. What I'm going to tell you is that you've OD'd on THC. Essentially, what I can tell you is that nobody has died from this. All I want you to do is I want you to relax for the rest of your afternoon. I want you to get in bed, get a hot cup of tea, whatever relaxes you. I want you to feel safe. I want
Order
you to know
pizza,
whatever paranoid you're having, this is the medication. It is not actually happening. And just kind of walked her through it.
Yeah.
And it was really heartwarming for me, because obviously I was a criminal cannabis smoker, and now I can use it for good, because obviously I've seen it so many times and I know exactly what's happening to this woman. But of course, nobody with no experience would know, and they would be worried too, they would think she's making it up. But I know exactly what's going on.
Once you cede control, because it's that kind of the lack of control compounds the anxiety. So it's basically cancel all your appointments, cancel everything for the rest of the day, enjoy it. It's a great time.
Food, it'll taste great.
Put on your favorite album. It's no, but that's I mean, I guess it's also that story speaks to the level of care that BCP provides, all that tailored TLC for all the patients. But it is true though. I can imagine, people who are cannabis naive, maybe particularly elderly patients in some cases, having had 60 years of the war on drugs and everything. It's it must be quite confronting. But well, I don't know. Mitch, did you have any more questions? I'm a little.
You're a little what? Little pooped today, are you?
Little sunburn wants to go home.
Yeah.
Oh, it's no, it has been a long day. We actually visited some farms today. It was very nice. That is. I do have one more question, because there were a couple of people who I'm not going to mention the names of, but basically you would know this from being in the pharmacy. Some people have a report to have feeling a little bit different after spending the whole day just around cannabis, especially copious amounts. But, you wouldn't imagine, they're not really ingesting it. They're not inhaling it per se. They're not, burning it and smoking it or vaporizing it. but they are just around copious amounts, and they sometimes have reported to me feeling a little bit, just a little bit different, not necessarily bad or off or dizzy or anything, but just a little bit
For those
altered.
people, by the way, listening, Mitch just sort of moved his body in a way that was demonstrative of him feeling a little bit different. But
yeah,
That's what
you'll have to watch the YouTube to see it. But what are your thoughts on something like that? Obviously, by this stage, you're pretty desensitized to it, I'd imagine. But do maybe people that come in, start working as a dispense tech for the first time, report anything like that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, the funny thing is I completely, it's just I don't even notice it anymore. But I remember very specifically when, like, one time when we were compounding flour, and it just permeated through the whole place. Like it's fairly small pharmacy. I know most people don't know that, but it's fairly small, and it just reeked. Like it smelled like somebody was having a massive session upstairs or something. We'd have a kilo or two sitting there. And
it was just you
people
living up
like
there,
acting
right?
like they had gotten high and things like that. And okay, so first and foremostly, guys, that's THCA. You need to decarboxylate to get high. So, I mean, there's possibly traces, but it's definitely not something that's going to get you high. What you're getting high off is terpenes, which again speaks to the way the terpenes work. And I remember we do decarbing in our lab. So we, decarboxylate it so we can use it in certain ways so that we've got the active THC and CBD. And one day my lab technician left the door open, and so it permeates through our entire warehouse, and people started to feel nauseous. So people actually got side effects from it where they felt really uncomfortable. Their heart started racing. They started getting nauseous. So that's a little bit different to just feeling a little bit funny. Which is what people do get from the flower, which is, any of the terpenes. I could list, it could be myrcene, it could be anything. But yeah, they're not getting high. They're just smelling terpenes. And I think it's a psychosomatic thing because they can smell weed. They're like, oh, because usually when you're around weed, you're around the smoke, which will get you high. But actually the raw stuff won't get you high. I promise.
Yeah. And it
does, well done.
it's probably as well. I mean, even people who are, frequently in, say in your work environment, who are exposed to strong terpenes and aromas all day, every day. I imagine the body's just naturally adaptive. So you'd build up a tolerance to it anyway.
Yeah. You can tell when someone's been working there for a while because they don't notice the weed smell anymore.
Yeah, exactly. No, it is. You hit the nail on the head before when you were just saying, like, it's so individual. I mean, I was chatting to someone the other day who just, as a result of pain from IBD, is literally having 4 grams of dried flour a day. Obviously, very expensive to have to support that, but it provides much better relief than any of the other medications that he'd previously tried. But I was just thinking, I was like, I think 4 grams for me would very quickly put me on the floor.
It's a lot. It's actually our maximum that we're willing to accept a month. In my opinion, if you're at 4 grams a day, if I was the practitioner, and obviously I can't prescribe cannabis, but if I was, let's play the game, I would tell them that we need to look at their regime again. So inhalation is great. And I am, a big fan of flower, try it myself. But you need that more long acting absorption. So things like oils or capsules or something. And the problem with this at the moment is there are a few good products on the market, but there's none that just jump to mind for me that would be able to just be amazing. But really you need some long acting to keep you stable throughout the day, and then just use that inhalation to top up. That's really what you need to be doing. Because if you're at 4 grams a day, you're hitting a tolerance. There's a point where it stops helping with your pain. It stops helping with your sleep. And that's not the goal. The goal is to help with your pain and sleep. So we need to readjust and think about what we're doing here.
Well, like when he told me that, I was just blown away because we're just having a completely normal conversation, no signs of intoxication whatsoever. And I'm like, hang on. So he's like, oh, already a couple of grams down today. I'm thinking, wow, that speaks to the tolerance.
And everyone's different. Some people are going to need the 120 grams, like I'm totally fine with the 120 grams. I've had prescribers try and clear 300 grams a month with me, and I'm like, no, I won't accept that. They wouldn't even be breathing oxygen. You're not doing your patient a favor.
Yeah, that is intense. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, so we had to max it at the 120.
Sad.
I know. No, it just usually leads to things like selling, and we're not trying to perpetuate that in the market. It completely derails it as a medication, and I'm not really for people selling medicinal stuff on the market. It's not cool.
Yeah, totally. I forget that
They
happens.
put massive markups on it.
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
No, I did see a thread about that actually on Reddit not that long ago.
Yeah, they thought that was us. It wasn't.
Okay. Just FYI. No, Liz, it's always an absolute pleasure to chat with you.
Absolutely.
I'm all out of questions, mainly a little bit hazy from the sunburn, but
Yeah, buddies. Go put some aloe vera on. Have a nice
put
coffee.
aloe vera.
Stay
Will CBD oil help?
No, go drink water.
Drink water. Don't wear a white shirt for the rest of the week.
CBD beer, will that help?
You can put it on your skin. It'll help your skin. But
Yeah.
Ingesting it, just stick with water.
Yeah,
Go the water.
I'll try it out. I've heard about this water.
I don't trust it.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much, Liz. Always a pleasure. We love what BCP is doing, and I know, now with an outpost here in Melbourne. So that's all very exciting for you guys. Do you want a special plug for the same?
Pretty intense last year, we know, but we've done everything we can to bring it back to being who we used to be. So service is our number one priority at the moment, and making sure that we have very educated staff members and et cetera, et cetera.
Fantastic. And there are a lot of staff members, so I know that keeps you busy educating, right?
Yeah, actually I did product training 3 times last week.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, we'll look forward to catching up with you. I know, we'll be up in Brisbane later this year for the UIC, which we're obviously really excited about. So I'm sure we'll have to swing by BCP.
Oh, you have to see Seed. And I'll be down mid-February, so we'll make a plan.
Nice. Looking forward to that. All right. Until next time, Liz, thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you soon.
All right. Get some rest, my friends. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Liz. Speak
Bye.
soon. Cheers.
It's Andrew Dowling here and Mitch Kurtz. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the AltMed podcast. Make sure to hit like and subscribe because we have way more content coming out. And you got to stay up to date with it. It was good until you did that. Okay. Sorry.